Hi, I'm Suze, I'm an economist and a comedian, and I'm making some videos about all the stuff that's really important in the economy right now. Now you might be wondering why I'm making a video about the Industrial Revolution. My mate said she hadn't really thought about it since school. Well, the thing is, I think we learned quite a misleading account of the Industrial Revolution in school, and it's linked to lots of things that we learn that are also quite misleading about British history in general. So if you're British, what do you know about the Industrial Revolution? What did you learn in school? I learned a few main bullet points, basically that it happened in the 1760s, some British people invented stuff like Richard Arkwright, can't remember what he invented, probably railways, and it was basically really great. Before that, nothing was really happening anywhere in the world until the Industrial Revolution, and basically loads of stuff was produced. It was really great, the world changed for the better, it was amazing. Oh, there were definitely railways, did I mention the railways? I think some children had to go and work in factories for like 16-hour days, but we ironed out all the teething problems, and basically it was just really great. Oh, did I mention railways? So I think the slave trade was also happening at that same time period, but that's a separate topic, and I'm sure that's not linked, because anyway, oh, there were railways, did I mention railways? Now you might think I'm exaggerating, only slightly. Those are genuinely the main bullet points, and quite a lot of stuff is missed out, and the stuff that's missed out turns out to be quite important for the present. Also, I think it's really important because we're going through what people are calling a new industrial wave right now, with the rise of digital and new tech and renewables. I think it's pretty important we understand the last industrial revolution before we launch ourselves full throttle into a new one. So before we start, I'm pretty new to making YouTube videos. I'd love it if you subscribe to my channel if you want more economics content. And also, I used to run these walking tours of the economy. A lot of people said to me I should make them into videos, put them online, but I wanted to wait until I got really good at like video production before I did that. But then I couldn't really wait any longer, so I thought I'd just start. So in this first video, it's exciting because I can take you anywhere. So we go to a really glamorous, exciting location. We're not staying here, we're going somewhere else. Also, I'm also really good, not just at economics, but at like nature photography. So if you like your nature, you're in for a real treat in this video. Anyway, yeah, let's go to the exciting, glamorous location. Can't wait to show you where it is. Let's go. Hi, I'm Suze, I'm a this is quite noisy, but we're here. I've brought you to the back streets of Croydon, Mitcham, to tell you 3 things you probably didn't know about the Industrial Revolution. You also probably don't know why we've come here to the back streets of like Mitcham, quite close to Croydon. You'll find that out at the end of the videos. But anyway, let's start. We're going to go back to the start, to where absolutely everything pretty much started, really, to the 1760s, because nothing was really happening anywhere in the world before the British Industrial Revolution. As you know, really nothing happening anywhere, nothing important. So let's go back to the very start. Let's go there. Well, let's go somewhere else anyway. So we're here by a railway. The first thing I want to say is not everything started with the British Industrial Revolution, which is kind of obvious. However, I was definitely not told that Britain wasn't really the first country to start producing really high quality industrial output. So before the British Industrial Revolution, India was the world's major manufacturing powerhouse, as William Dalrymple says. And as Shashi Tharoor said, Britain's industrialisation was largely based on India's deindustrialisation. So at this time period, India was producing about a quarter of the world's industrial output, and there was also quite a lot happening in lots of places around the world. Cotton was being produced in lots of different places. And it is of course true that some British people invented stuff, definitely not taking that away from like Richard Arkwright, who invented the spinning jenny in the 1760s, but other people were inventing loads of stuff too, and in fact a similar sort of machine had already been invented by a Chinese inventor in the 14th century, Wang Zhen. I hope I've pronounced that right. What was distinct and new was bringing people together into massive factories and to produce things on that scale. So of course perhaps that is where there is some truth in it being an industrial revolution. However, that wasn't necessarily good, because the manufacturing in India, it was on a smaller scale, but it was higher paid and higher quality. The cotton was just a much better quality. So one other thing is that everyone always goes on about the railways, and it is true that railways did get built in places like India by the British, but the railways got built in places just to take their resources outright. Like, I had an ex-boyfriend that built shelves in my flat, but he only built them to put his stuff on. Like, I didn't benefit from those shelves. So, the second thing you probably didn't know about the Industrial Revolution was it was really violent. Some great books to read about this are Priya Satia, who's written a book called Empire of Guns, The Violent Making of the Industrial Revolution, and also Sven Beckett, who's written this book called Empire of Con. Someone contributed there to my video. Anyway, Sven Beckett, Empire of Con, who came up with the term war capitalism, which is really important because we talk about capitalism in this very vague way without really thinking about the details. He sets out the details of the cotton trade in general, which is a brilliant book. But let's just have a few summary points of why it was so violent. For lots of reasons, right? The first reason is in England, right? Because I'm here on Mitcham Common. I think I've come to a bad place, to be honest. I think it is nicer if I was to go a bit further over there. But anyway, here's a panorama. As a reminder that there was tons of common land. So people used to be able to use the common land for lots of reasons. And these lands were all cleared. And it gave people no option really but to go and work in the factories. And Polanyi talks about this. So the quote I can't remember, and I'm probably too cold to remember. He basically says the effects of this, of clearing all the common land, were bad on people's lives. It was pretty dire. Because, you know, when the factories opened up, people weren't mad keen to go and work like 16-hour days and send their kids to work in factories. So there were reasons why that happened in this country. Now, of course, that doesn't really compare to the level of violence that took place in other places. So the second major act of violence is where all the resources came from for the Industrial Revolution. So initially this was cotton. Where did all the cotton come from? Who grew the cotton? Who farmed the cotton? Now, we often talk about the slave trade as a separate topic, but it was intertwined with the Industrial Revolution for tons of reasons. This is the first one. In further ways of industrialisation, this is also an important question. So where did the resources come from? Where did the oil come from? And actually, where did the minerals and stuff that we need for renewables, where are they coming from today? The third place where there was a lot of violence was also getting the markets for all of this industrial output, because if you're producing this much stuff, you've got to sell it somewhere, and you've also got to stop other people producing stuff. So that was the third major place that violence took place. But anyway, I'm really cold, so I'm gonna go. Thing is, right, I never learned about any of these aspects of the Industrial Revolution at school, and I always think it's really interesting that we don't learn about this. So British people, we think we're really good at like queuing, but a huge part of British history has been going around the world to other countries and just taking stuff, like from India through to loads of countries in Africa, through to oil in the Middle East. Like, British people just rocked up and took stuff. And today, we think we're a nation of people that's like really polite and good at queuing. Like, go to the Middle East, ask what the British are famous for. Queuing probably isn't gonna come up. But anyway, that's that. It's cold now, I'm gonna go back. I probably wish I'd come to a more scenic part of Mitcham Common. I haven't brought you to the best place. It's really cold. Anyway, we're gonna go and find the third reason, which is the real reason why we're in Mitcham. And yeah, let's go and do that now. There's a magpie there. I really worry about magpies. Is that bad luck, do you think? So the third thing you probably didn't know is that banking and finance was a really important part of the Industrial Revolution. In fact, maybe finance was the thing that was revolutionised at that time period. Right, so people often will tell you there's one narrative, which isn't necessarily totally false, but one narrative is that in Britain we have two economies. We have the manufacturing economy and we have the financial economy, and they're really separate. And while there are perhaps some differences, I would say that the two are really intertwined and always have been. So for example, to lead to the Industrial Revolution, we needed loads of things to happen in finance. One of those was stuff like getting money for all these big overseas ventures. And the East India Company, the company that went to India, was a private company, a joint stock company. That was a pretty innovative thing to do at the time. The second thing is like the Bank of England and financing the navy and the weaponry that we needed to dominate other European powers in the battle for resources, which was part of the Industrial Revolution. And tons of other things. Now, I'm not saying things haven't changed, and you could definitely argue that stuff has pulled away and there's new types of finance now that are growing because we've lost the manufacturing base and things are definitely changing. So I've brought you to this housing area of housing because housing is definitely one area that has been brought more into finance, and there's been lots of consequences of that, the financial crisis and rising house prices in the UK being a couple of them. Now, I haven't just brought you to any old chunk of houses. We've come to this particular place for a very good reason. So can you guess why? Have a look around. This is Phillips Close, and that road is Eindhoven Close, which I might pronounce wrong. And there's a whole load more over there, which is called Mullards. Why do you think I've come here? Phillips, Mullards, do you know those names? So Mullards was a really big British manufacturing company. They've also got a big factory in Blackburn, which is no longer a Mullards company, but the building's still there in Blackburn. But here it was taken over by Phillips, and then the whole factory closed down and was demolished in the 1980s, and there's now housing. So I only really know this because my dad used to work in the factory that was on this site before it was closed down and demolished. And it's now been made into housing. Actually, it seems like a pretty nice place to live now. And it's down by the historic River Wandle, which is where lots of, I think, artists painted it. Apparently it's really inspiring for people, the River Wandle. However, there are some massive questions around housing in this country today, in the UK, right? My mum is just calling, so I'm gonna get that. So one result of finance today being so tied up around the housing market and houses being such an important financial asset is that house prices are really high, particularly around London. And the cost of living is really high for people. And actually a lot of people today are forced into really low wage, really long hour jobs. Not the same as the time of the Industrial Revolution, but still there are some really important parallels and some really important questions about why it is so expensive to just be able to live in the UK. Really cold here. Ducks. So while I'm walking around in this lovely nature, isn't it nice as a, is that, oh sorry, the duck is a plastic bag, sorry about that. Yeah, it's just a plastic bag. So one thing I will say is that we think of the Industrial Revolution as when like machines and stuff was invented, and they definitely were. However, it was also the time when we invented how we measure the economy. So like, there's a lot of debate about who came out of the idea of measuring gross national product. But anyway, English bankers and merchants came out of the idea in that same time period. Right, I was taking the pic. I mean, I did genuinely see a plastic bag, but now it's a heron. Just like a heron just over there, look at that. So I think I got a little bit distracted by the heron there and didn't make the point I was trying to make, which is that we think that the Industrial Revolution was really great because the people that benefited from it defined the measures of success. And this early version of the thing, how we measure our economy, this early version of GDP, GNP, was actually created during that time period. And I would really encourage you to look at the work of Jamaica Kincaid. She's written a book called A Small Place. And this measure makes the Industrial Revolution look very good, but only if you ignore tons of stuff. Only if you ignore the violence and suffering of the slave trade. Only if you ignore the working conditions in the factories. Only if you ignore the destruction of the environment, right? And the reason I talk about the suffering and the violence of the Industrial Revolution is because I think we need to see the suffering of the past so that we can stop it cycling into the present. And it is cycling into the present in all sorts of ways. Now, I'm not saying all this to try and slag off British manufacturing, like not at all. I should say I really like stuff that is made in Britain. I also like stuff that's made in other places, right? I wish the economy could be one in which we collaborate with other people from other places and celebrate and work together, rather than what we seem to have, which is a system that seems to relentlessly compete prices and compete working conditions down across countries. Like, that isn't ideal, really, is it? So And finally, we should look at alternatives, creating things in different ways. The reason I talk about the different ways of producing stuff that isn't just factories is not because I'm trying to go back to some pre-industrial age. We're not going back anywhere. Where we are now, we just got to go forward somewhere. But I think we should realise there are loads of different ways of organising and creating and collaborating with people. So look at people that are doing that. There are so many places. I'm sure you know about some of them as well. I'm sure you know people that are creating and producing stuff. Support them. Create and produce something yourself. Do all this sort of thing. So you could support people that are creating all sorts of things, like people that are creating YouTube videos about economics. That'd be great if you wanted to support them. You could like their videos and subscribe to their channel. Okay, so I'm gonna go now. Thanks a lot then, bye. By the way, did I mention the railways?